We are right in the thick of it. We are in the middle of it, and we are the ones paying the consequences.
Tonight, hundreds of thousands across the country and in the far north go on a climate strike.
This is a welcome development, but the process is difficult. It has to be. The scars run deep.
And the Supreme Court wraps up its historic sitting and tour in Manitoba. Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. On Friday, millions around the world hit the streets as part of the swelling global movement to confront the climate emergency. The Friday student strikes began last year when 16-year-old Greta Thunberg skipped school to protest her government's climate policies. Less than a year later, youth across political borders, continents, and cultures have joined in. Lindsay Richardson brings us this from Montreal, where Thunberg addressed thousands.
Beautiful and huge. These are two words that we've heard repeated several times over today to describe this historic march in Montreal. Not only is it believed to be the biggest protest ever seen in Quebec history, but the worldwide climate strike overall is being heralded as the biggest environmental mobilization known in human history. Early estimates put the attendance of today's event at about 300,000 people, but looking around, it's easy to say that that is possibly a conservative estimate. People do now believe that up to 500,000 people gathered on Mount Royal to participate in today's march, and everywhere you look, you can see handmade signs and banners, many of them on recycled materials like cardboard boxes. But just before the start of today's march, 16-year-old Swedish activist Greta Thunberg, who along with water protector Adam Peltier is one of the figures most associated with this movement, addressed the media after traveling overnight from the United States. Fun fact, she traveled up here in an electric car actually loaned to her by none other than Arnold Schwarzenegger. So at this morning's media engagement, she was greeted by a delegation of climate leaders, including David Suzuki, Assembly of First Nations Chief Harry Bellegarde, and Chief Ghislain Picard, among others. They gifted Thunberg with crafts to acknowledge her efforts in this climate resistance. But Thunberg, in turn, acknowledged the contributions and expertise of First Nations when it comes to earth and water protection. She invited a group of 15 Indigenous youth to lead the charge with her today, an invitation which they happily accepted. Now, during a brief question and answer period, we were able to actually ask Thunberg why she felt this was an important inclusion to make, and here's what she had to say.
Indigenous people have, for centuries and millennia, protected the local environment, and of course we need to, because they are often the ones who are at the front line. So we need to be able to hear their voices. So that's why I think it's so important that Indigenous people lead this fight.
Now, although the procession has made its way down Mount Royal to another assembly point, there are still some helicopters circling overhead and police officers standing by here. Now, at that assembly point, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, as well as other leaders, are expected to address today's crowds. But what remains to be seen is whether or not they are willing to pull up at the table and discuss the recommendations and concrete measures that are so eagerly anticipated by today's protesters. And we'll have more on that. But for now, I'm Lindsay Richardson reporting here in Montreal for APTN National News.
Parliament Hill is no stranger to demonstrations and marches, but today's climate strike in the nation's capital was a big deal. Thousands gathered on the lawn and in neighboring streets. APTN's Todd Lamourand waded through the crowd to bring us these Indigenous voices.
Estimates peg the crowd at more than 5,000, made up mainly of young climate strikers skipping school to say enough is enough. It certainly impressed Alice Niakapo-Suse.
Kind of like really cool to have everybody come here. And yeah, well, I feel like it's just like a really good thing for the planet and stuff like that.
Our culture's in danger! Nunavut is melting!
Several students from Nunavut Siviniksuvut were here to lend the voices of Inuit, saying they are experiencing more change than elsewhere.
And now that the ice is melting, we have longer summers and shorter winters. It makes it harder for Inuit to keep up with the traditional ways like hunting, camping, fishing.
Older people like R.J. Jones were also here to demonstrate, but take a back seat to their younger allies.
There are tons and tons of young people here, and being accountable to them and really centering their voices, because I find that's something that was lacking from my generation, and I don't want to hold young people back. I want to actually lift up their voices and support them.
And speaking of support, we came across this college student and his sign.
And it is their land, and we did steal that land, so it's important to listen to Indigenous communities when they, voice their concerns about the environment and about climate change. Plus, they've been warning us for a very long time, so it's about time that we listen.
And when you're on Parliament Hill, it's natural to talk politics. Dwayne Davey knows which political party has the best environmental platform.
We don't have to sell all our rivers. We don't have to have all these mines to have a retirement package or, a safe, secure economy. We can have all that and still protect the land. That's what I believe the Green Party pushes.
We were about to leave the crush of people when an elderly woman insisted we tape this.
And I would like to apologize to all the generations that came after me for not having done my best to help the planet. I am now going to do my best.
The election played in the background here. No politicians came to make speeches. And Conservative leader Andrew Scheer refused to attend any of the dozens of strikes across Canada. Todd Lamoran, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Well, we'd like to hear what you think about today's climate strike. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptnnews. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest Indigenous news. Well, we're not quite done with the climate strike just yet. When we come back from this break, we'll take you to Nunavut, where marches were also held. Stay with us. Here's a look at Saturday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. Sunny and 19 for Fredericton. Rain in Nain with a high of 9, 13 and showers for Happy Valley, Goose Bay. Showers in 20 for Montreal, 15 under the sun in Chibougamau. 23 in London with sunny skies, 24 with showers for Toronto. 16 in rain in Thunder Bay, 11 with a chance of snow for Sioux Lookout. A high of +1 for Churchill, 6 in God's Lake and Norway House, 10 under sunny skies in Winnipeg, 11 with the sun out in Brandon. Sunny and 5 in Regina and North Battleford, 7 under sunny skies in Saskatoon. Rain-snow mix and +4 for Uranium City and Stony Rapids. Welcome back. Canada's Arctic feels climate change more directly than most, and that was evident in Iqaluit today as residents took to the streets in Nunavut's capital to join the international climate protests. Our Ken Driscoll was there.
Iqaluit's Four Corners intersection is the de facto center of the city, so that's where climate change activists brought their protests today. These people turned out to cheer, chant, and receive support from passers-by. When you consider only 7,000 people live in Iqaluit, that's a strong turnout. And reflecting Iqaluit's multicultural nature, there were banners in French, English, and Inuktitut. Climate change is a fact of life in Nunavut. Melting permafrost hurts infrastructure. Animals are acting differently, and people here are noticing.
We are right in the thick of it. We are in the middle of it, and we are the one paying the consequences. It's September, which is crazy, and there's no snow, and it's not supposed to be this way.
Young and old, Inuit and non-Inuit, it was an inclusive protest. But the young voices might be the most important. They're the ones who will be living with climate change the longest.
so we can protect the earth. It's bad pollution, and there's lots of plastic killing animals.
This protest was round one. Round two happened a little later in the day, when students from Inukshuk High School made their way down the hill to the Four Corners, making noise like high school kids do so well.
I feel like a lot of people will say that like a walk is not really doing anything, but elections are coming up soon, and when politicians see how many people want this and how many young people want this, you know, like we're the next generation of voters and next generation of consumers, and our say is important.
Nunavut may be ground zero for climate change, but per capita, Nunavummiut are some of the biggest carbon users in the country. Most of our food is flown in. All of our electrical power comes from diesel. So while this crowd is hopeful for change, it will take billions in investment and a severe change in how business is done if those measures are ever going to be introduced here. Ken Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
This week, the International Panel on Climate Change released a special report on the state of the oceans and cryosphere, meaning all frozen parts of the Earth. The findings are frightening, particularly in the north. As carbon concentrations rise, the oceans are becoming more acidic and absorbing more heat, threatening the safety and way of life of Inuit. Monica L. Kaniok is president of the Inuit Circumpolar Council of Canada, and she joins us from Iqaluit. President L. Kaniok, you said in a statement this week that this new report proves what Inuit have been saying for decades. Can you explain?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Dennis. I think this report is an acknowledgement that what Inuit have been saying about the changes in the climate and the adaptation that we've had to endure through the years just endorses those things that we've been saying over the years, and that report has indications in there of all the things that we've been saying about that, in terms also of having Indigenous knowledge written in the report.
Is there anything that does stand out to you in this latest report?
Yes, the report refers to a report that we put out as ICC Canada, which refers to the Pirkealuksuksua Commission, in which there is an Inuit-led management regime of the North Water Palinia, where cryosphere has had experiences in the changes. You know, the ice, as you probably have heard in the past, with Greenland glaciers melting over the years, and this melting of the sea ice has effects on our way of life. It affects the melting of the sea ice affects our animals, our land, our way of living. We've been having to adapt through the years for that.
With things changing so fast in the north for you, what are the biggest challenges in trying to adapt?
Yes, you know, the covering of the sea ice helps animals, marine animals, especially like the polar bear or the seals. We've had to go further to go hunting for these species and things like that. The changes of the land in the way the weather's been affecting for 1 year, especially here in Iqaluit, we've had ice covering the land where the animals have not been able to get at their vegetation, like the caribou on the barren land. They've had problems with that. We've had potholes in Januaries as an example, things like that that are not good for our way of life.
Climate change seems to be a top priority for many as we head into this federal election. What do party leaders need to know if they're going to address the emergency in a way that is respectful to Inuit knowledge and to Inuit needs?
as an ICC Canada organization, we're a non-partisan organization, but that doesn't mean we stay quiet. We've been coming out with a question to the election candidates once a week to ask them things like what they would do with climate change and other things, and we're focusing on things like that. And they're the policymakers. They can make changes, so that we're keen on knowing what they have to say about that.
President Elkaniak, well, I'll have to leave it there, but appreciate you sharing some of your knowledge with us.
Thank you.
It's been a historic week for the Supreme Court of Canada as it held hearings outside of Ottawa for the first time in its history. We'll take you to a ceremony after the break. Here's a look at the rest of Saturday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. +3 with snow for Grand Prairie. 11 in showers in Medicine Hat, snow, and 5 in Calgary, Red Deer, and Edmonton. Sunny and 17 for Victoria and Campbell River. Showers and 16 for Vancouver. +7 in Dease Lake and Fort Nelson under sunny skies. 14 is the high in Prince Rupert. Snow and +5 for Old Crow. +6 for Watson Lake. 2 under sunny skies in Rock River. +8 with the sun out for Fort Liard, Trout Lake, and Norman Wells. 5 above for Yellowknife. -1 with snow for Sax Harbor. +5 with snow for Pawlatuck. +4 in snow in Colville Lake. -5 with snow for Baker Lake. -6 and showers for Chesterfield. Snow and 0 in Arviette. -1 with a rain-snow mix for Resolute. Showers and +3 in Arctic Bay. Welcome back. The Supreme Court of Canada has wrapped up its historic visit to Winnipeg. It's the first time the court has sat outside of Ottawa, and the tour ended with some one-on-one meetings with Indigenous groups in the province. As Brittany Hobson shows us, it was a moment to share and listen.
For thousands of years, the Forks has been a meeting place for Indigenous people. But for the first time, the site played host to a historic meeting between First Nations people and Canada's highest court. The Supreme Court of Canada engaged in a face-to-face meeting with the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs.
This is a welcome development, but the process is difficult. It has to be. The scars run deep.
The SCC was in Winnipeg this week for a series of meetings and cases. Friday's meeting was a chance for the court and AMC to share histories. Chief Justice Richard Wagner says his work was to listen. But before that, he acknowledged Canada's role in colonization.
From the dispossession of First Nations lands to the suppression of First Nations culture and traditions, and through the imposition of policies that, whether they intended to or not, cause terrible harm to children, to men and women, and to entire communities.
AMC Grand Chief Arlen Dumas asked the court to meet with him when it was announced they would be in Winnipeg. He says the two groups must figure out a way to move forward together.
I'm always a sovereigntist. I will always continue to live by my own constitution. However, we are all here. We're treaty partners, and we have agreed that we'll work together.
Later in the afternoon, the SCC met with the Manitoba Métis Federation. They broke bread over a meal of elk, moose, and wild rice. MMF President David Chartrand says a meeting is an important step toward reconciliation.
Nobody knows all the answers yet today, but it's important we try to search for those answers and understand that it is important to know each other.
Chartrand says he has respect for the Supreme Court and what they do, but hopes to one day see a system where Indigenous laws can be incorporated as well.
What's going to be coming for the future is Indigenous law. Will we be able to combine Indigenous law with civil common and the present law we sit today?
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Former Attorney General of Canada, Jodi Wilson-Raybould, has released her new book entitled From Where I Stand. APTN's Tina House was at the book launch and has this story.
From where I stand, the book by Jodi Wilson-Raybould has hit the bookshelves. At a book signing in Vancouver, there was a long lineup of people who came to meet her. One of them was Rochelle Gaudette from Alberta.
I'm very excited. It's an absolute honor to get to shake hands with this lady. She stands for everything I believe in and everything that I stand for back home. Same line of work, just different level of politics, but I'm thrilled and can't wait to see her back in the House of Commons.
Wilson-Raybould says the book took her 10 years to finish and provides insight into the relationship between Canada and Indigenous peoples. It provides potential solutions on how to move forward with true reconciliation and to rebuild nations.
We can move beyond the history of denial of rights in this country when it comes to Indigenous peoples and to create the space for Indigenous nations within Canada to rebuild. And one of those solutions that not only have I been advocating, but Indigenous peoples since as long as I can remember, is a framework for rights recognition and to enable Indigenous communities to translate the minimum standards, for example, in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the full box of rights, that is Section 35 of our Constitution, into practical and meaningful benefits on the ground in communities.
Currently, she's campaigning to getting re-elected as an independent in her riding of Vancouver-Granville.
I see myself working incredibly hard to get re-elected as the Member of Parliament for Vancouver-Granville. I feel that I have an important voice. There are important voices everywhere, and they all need to be heard. And my time in federal politics, I don't think it's done. And my grandmother always taught me that you have an important voice, that you need to use your voice and use it to ultimately improve the lives of people. So that's what I'm going to do. Who knows what the future will bring.
Her book was sold out within 45 minutes at her book signing. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Well, some sad news to leave you with tonight. Well, some parts of the country are still enjoying the last few bits of summer. It's time to bundle up for Alberta. Snow is expected in southern parts of the province this weekend, including up to 20 centimeters in Calgary. And as unwelcome as it may be, snow in the fall isn't all that rare. Last year, Calgary saw their snowiest October on record, with around 50 centimeters falling in that month alone. And they can keep it there. That's your APTN National News for this Friday. For more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca, and download the APTN News app. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great weekend.
APTN!